Hello there, guys, and welcome back to Journey Through the Unexplained with myself, Russell Old, and my lovely co-host, Joe Downsville. Thank you for listening to them songs. Just to give you what they are, it is Why Do You Pretend by Wild Horses and Where Am I by Four Aura. Great songs there. And technology hasn't failed us from our good friend all the way from Texas. And normally I'd say sunny, but he's just told us halfway through the songs that it's absolutely chucking down with snow there, and that does throw me a little bit when you're talking about Texas. So we've got Darryl E. Berry Jr. on the line with us. Are you there, Darryl?
Yes, I am. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for joining us. And I know we was talking sort of in that interval there that technology and like people around you, you're suffering from sort of outages and everything like that, and but we've managed to sort of get through that, and we've hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll keep that lovely signal all the way through.
Sounds ready. I mean, if we do get disconnected, I have my phone ready, so I'll just dial in my phone, so we should be fine.
Thank you ever so much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw the interview over to Joe because our listeners, and as I explained to you last night, Dale, I sort of get waylaid into my mind going off. So I'll pass you over to the interview to Joe, and I'll just intervene as and when I feel I've got a question for you. Is that all right?
Awesome. Sounds good.
Hi, Darryl. How are you?
Doing good, Joe.
Good?
How are
Yeah,
you
nice
doing?
one. I'm good. Yeah. Well, it's a bit warmer here than Texas, and that's like Russ said, it's a bit of an unusual situation, isn't it? I mean, it's about 12 degrees here, and there, I suppose it's somewhere near zero. Yeah, just to go straight into it, you kindly sent Russ and myself your book, Travel Far. I'm not sure. When did you actually write this book?
It was first published in 2015. I actually started writing it um, probably in like 2001, like the very first version. But it
Yeah.
was published in 2015.
And then you just added bits on and adjusted stuff as you'd gone along in different editions, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I actually rewrote it about two times because I had various technological things, and sometimes I just learned a lot and just decided to rewrite it. And I did several research studies. So in 2000, I believe 12, I did my first research study where I taught a group of people to have out-of-body experiences to validate the techniques and to refine them a bit, and to help what I put into the book. So just throughout the years, various things I did to update it.
So when you've done that research with several persons, do you sort of watch them from outside the room as they go into it and study them from a physical point of view, or do you just sort of question them after the experience?
It was online, so I've refined that through the years as well. So the first research study was basically through email. Basically, I wrote out the sort of progression of techniques, and I would send it to them, and they would send me their journal entries, and I would coach them week by week. The way I do it now is on my website, they actually log in and join the forums, and they put their journals on the forums, and we actually get together on the forums on a medium similar to this of video chat, and I coach them week by week. And so it's basically just coaching and providing guidance and instruction throughout week by week so they can better apply themselves to the techniques, and they in turn provide data and as they progress and what's going on, and I'm able to further refine the techniques as well as further map the process of getting out of body so we can be more aware of what's going on.
That's really interesting. And that, I suppose, is the website for that is nextdensity.org. Is that right?
That's right, nextdensity.org, nextdensity.org, and it's there's no charge. And even the book Travel Far, if you go to nextdensity.org, if you could get it from Amazon if you like, but you could also download it for free.
Yeah, that's what was amazing. Like we had a little brief chat last night, didn't we? Yourself, you, and Russ. And I said to you then, it was amazing that you was selling the book for £5 on Amazon, which is amazing. There's probably not many books that you can buy on there for anywhere near £5. So that's amazing for you to do that. And like you just said, you can purchase it for free if you want to. But doing all the research and that, is it for not being rude, but is it for your benefit? Is it to put out there on this website, or is it to do you sort of are you sponsored by any universities or anything like that?
I would say, well, I'm not sponsored by a university, not yet, perhaps in the future. But I
Yeah.
would definitely say it's for my benefit and for others' benefit universal. Because for one, when I first started, I didn't really, when I first started having experiences, I didn't even realize it was something unique. I thought just everybody did it because nobody ever talked about it. So I thought it was just something that everybody did. And then when I found out that, okay, there's like books about it and there's like some kind of unique or special thing, then I didn't know if it was just a few people can do it really or if anybody can do it. So that's why I started teaching people. And eventually I learned that it's a natural thing. Anybody can do it. And my outlook now is I want to actually bring it more into a scientific sphere because like right now I'm in school for physics. And one of my outlooks is when we talk about like quantum physics and string theory and things like that, which of course I'm not adept at now, but I'm just slightly familiar with the
Mm.
idea of different dimensions. So I hypothesize or suspect that the different dimensions that people access in the out of body state relate to different dimensions that we may find in physics. So
Don't you find you're a bit at odds with the science world? Because do they accept that there are other dimensions? Do they actually discuss this? And
well, I mean, at this point, it's discussed at a theoretical level. And like I said, I'm still at the very basic level of physics, so I definitely don't have a deep understanding of that aspect of it yet. But I'm aware that on the theoretical perspective, it's talked about that there may be other dimensions out there. So, I suspect that at a certain point in technological development, um, we will be able to bridge that gap and be able to technologically access these dimensions. And that's one of the reasons why I want to have research studies is when you talk about the out of body experience, I find there's a deficit. There's a deficit in scientific understanding and research. So I think that the mainstream scientific community is well within their rights to not accept it as a valid phenomena because it's not been put to the scientific test. So that's
so
one
it's
of the
good
things I
that you're
want to do.
doing. Sorry to interrupt. So it's good that you're doing this research and putting it out there on your nextdensity.org website, and hopefully that will bring it forward in as much that they will start, getting more involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to do. I mean, well, one thing I want to do is develop a team of people that can do it. Like speaking about my experiences, right? Like one of the common tests that are done. Like there's a lady, Dr. Susan Blackmore. She did several experiments in paranormal, and she found herself that there's no evidence for it. But one of the things I found is that the research always involves like observing a third party, right? But one of the experiences I had was, there was a period of time when, I wasn't quite sure if it was real myself. I mean, I thought it was real, but I was like, well, I didn't really quite really test it. And I knew somebody else who can get out of body, a friend of mine, who can still get out of body a lot better than me. He's awesome. But what I decided to do was, so at this period of time, we would talk on the phone regularly, not just about metaphysical stuff, but just about anything, girls or sports or whatever. So it was just common for us to talk every day. So it wasn't odd for us to talk on the phone. So what I did was I went out about it to see him without telling him. Like I didn't tell him I was going to go see him. I didn't tell him I was going to do any type of experiment. And I decided to do a.
Is this where you dressed in a robe?
That's right. That's right. I
Yeah,
decided to make myself look a certain way because I learned
yeah.
throughout the years you can change your appearance. And also I read you could transfer information, so I figured I'll tell them some crazy word and I'll make myself look a different way to test the experience. So I made myself appear in this long white robe with a gold band around the center, around the chest area, like a band of gold around the chest area. And I went out of body and saw him. This was one of the experiences where I wasn't too fully conscious. I think it was a period of time when I wasn't practicing so much, but I was practicing enough to where I was confident I can get out if I really wanted to. So I went out and I had the sort of hazy experience of meeting him. And the next day we talked on the phone as normal. I didn't mention it at all. We just had a normal conversation like normal. In the middle of the conversation, he threw out, "Hey, I saw you out of body last night." And he identified, hey, you was wearing this long shirt with this robe around, with this gold band around the center. You seemed like you were not too clear, like you were drunk. He volunteered that information to me without me mentioning anything about the experiment. So, to me, that supports the contention that there's some kind of valid thing going on. Now, there's also experiences where, like Robert Monroe, he's a common explorer in these realms, and he had experiences where he went out and was tested, and he was not able to accurately verify things. There was other experiences where he was able to sort of semi-accurately verify things. So what's going on there? So I do think there's more testing that needs to be done, but I do think that at least that experience gives me the standing in my mind to propose that there is something going on that makes it a valid experience. So part of the reason why I want to do these research studies is to develop not just one or two people, but dozens of people who can go out and experiment. So imagine if you had 10 people in the UK and 10 people in the US and some scientists involved, and we were able to validate the transmission of information between each other, right? That's the type of things that I have in mind. But again, it starts with having people who can do it. So like the last year, and anybody who wanted to go to the site, they can see I put the sort of chart I made of the data that I got. But last year, throughout the year, 31 people joined. So not necessarily joined, but 31 people showed interest. The first day, 18 of those people didn't show up. So 13 started the first day. By the end of the 12-week period, only 2 people remained. But what I found interesting was 100% of the people who finished the whole thing had out-of-body experiences. So that was 2 people. And 50% of the people who completed sort of the halfway mark had an out-of-body experience. So 4 people total had out-of-body experiences. And between those, they had 8 total out-of-body experiences. Anybody can go in and see the chart there at the site.
So do you think that people are, dare I say, created at different levels that they can do it or not do it? Like you said just now that your friend can do it better than you. And these people that dropped out at an early stage, are they sort of less able to do it? Or, can anyone do it?
Yes. In my experience and observation, it's simply a matter of effort and willingness to do it. So the people who dropped out, and not even everybody dropped out. I mean, a few of them I said, look, you might as well just not be here because it was just a waste of time. They just weren't doing anything anyway. So Lewis, the reason why he got so good is because he practices like crazy. I mean, he's crazy. So there was a period of time when I had continuous awareness. At least that was my experience. Like I didn't lose awareness. I was either having a physical state or I was having an out-of-body state. But I practiced during that period of time all the time. Like I practiced and practiced. And that's my observation. Like I said, I taught people, even before that research study in 2012, I would teach people one-on-one. And I found that the people who apply themselves learned to do it and did it, and the people who didn't. So that's what I think the significance
it's
of
attitude. It's about
attitude, application. So I mean, the significance of that percentage, the 2 people who completed it, or the 4 people who had out-of-body experiences, is not that they were special. Those are just the people who applied themselves. No different than learning the violin or playing the piano or running a marathon. That's all it is. So like you all were saying in the first part of the show, most people just they just want to just go about their regular day. It doesn't interest them. That's why they don't succeed. So, for instance, a common
so you was listening in the first half of the show then.
Yeah.
So I mean, a common thing I've seen of people who I would teach is they would change the technique to try to make it easier. That's similar to if you're trying to be a bodybuilder, right? And your trainer says, okay, here's a 20-pound weight, let's lift it 20 times. And then the trainer turns their head and you pick up a 10-pound weight, right? And then before they turn back around, you put it down and pick up the 20 again. You say, yep, I lifted the 10 times, right? What's going to happen? You're not going to develop. So that's the kind of things I've observed. People were cutting their practices short. They were trying to make it easy. They were not practicing at all. Whereas the people who
I don't see the point. You're just fooling yourself. I don't see the point.
Exactly. So that is, in my experiences so far, and again, I can't necessarily say I've worked with a ton of people. Like last year was 31 throughout the year. In 2012, I think it was about 12 or something like that. And I didn't really keep count of the people that I taught on a one-to-one basis, but what I have so far, my hypothesis is that anybody can do it, and as a matter of fact, it's a natural part of sleep. Like, because you were mentioning in the earlier part the phases, we can talk about that a bit, or the altered states. I mean, there's a common understanding that we have different brainwave frequencies or states. So the beta is where we're at right now. The brain is, let's say, at 12, cycling at 12 to 30 cycles per second. Below that, you go to alpha. That's what, somewhere, let's say 10 to 13. When you start to getting into theta, that's where you start having altered state phenomena like visual imagery or vibrations. You're on, let's say, the 4 to 7 cycles per second. And then when you get to delta, that's when you're in deep sleep, and that's when you start, in my experiences, having the out of body experience. So the thing about that is, every day you go through all of those states, right? Every time
Yeah.
you even just watching a movie, you can dip into the alpha state, right? Whenever you go to sleep,
Just daydreaming as well. Daydreaming, I
yeah,
suppose, is going into
going
what's the
into the
one?
theta. That's right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
everybody goes through these states every single day and night. So what my finding is that it's simply a matter of training to the point so that you could be conscious while you're going through the experience. So one example is one of the experiences I had in one of the periods when I used to practice, because I went through my spurts where I practiced for a while and I stopped. But one of my little practice periods, I had an out of body experience where I was in this non-physical realm, and I saw one of my ex-girlfriends, and she was with a guy, and I haven't spoken to her in years at that point. We didn't end on bad terms. We just went our separate ways, but I still had her number. So but I saw her, and she was with this guy, and there was this other female there, and this other guy with her, and I went to go talk to her, and the guy she was with was very defensive, trying to keep me away. So I figured, oh, that must be her boyfriend. And he was like very angry at me because I was trying to talk to her. He was jealous. So I just flew off and went and did my thing. Right. So like the next day I called her up and I said, hey, I said, she knew my what I was into. I said, I saw you out of body last night, and you was with this guy, and there was this other female. And this guy, she said, oh, that's quite interesting because I have a new boyfriend now, and my best female friend, she has a boyfriend, and all four of us, we always go everywhere together. You know, I don't think that's enough to like convince the mainstream scientific community, but I thought that seemed a bit more than coincidence that, after, so many years, I happened to see her out of body and she was with this guy and this girl was there with this other guy and they all forced together. He was jealous and, you know what I'm saying? So, but I say that to say she had no memory of the experience. She had no memory at all. And I've of course read several books about it, and other people have said they have seen people out of body, but they have no memory of it. So my contention is that every single night people enter these states. When I was a kid and I had these experiences, I used to just go to sleep, and in the middle of the night I would float up and just float out the ceiling. So I suspect that every single night people have out of body experiences. It's just most people might be just floating near their body, and sometimes people travel around like that friend, but most people simply don't remember it. So,
Do you think the actual experience affects you physically? In other words, I've had times when I've woken up in quite sweaty and quite perspiring quite a lot. Do you think the actual experience that you go through, say you went on an out of body experience and you went off and sort of I know in one of your experiences you had this sword that you created and you could slay beings and stuff. Does it actually make you perspire? Does it have an effect on your physical body, or do you think it's completely detached from it?
well, I think there's an effect in the sense that you know when you look into science, they basically break it into two different camps. Like there's basically dualism that says that the mind is separate from the body, and then there's sort of reductionist view that sees the brain as basically the fountain of consciousness and everything, right? Even if so, from the perspective of dualism, of course, we're talking about the out of body experience. In order for us to remember that experience, even there needs to be some kind of communication or transfer of information between the mind or the consciousness or whatever you want to term it in the physical self. So I would say that from my experience or my hypothesis would be that what happens in the body is always an effect of what happens at the mind level,
Mm.
and there will be some communication between them. Something that comes to mind is an experience that happened with an explorer named Robert Bruce. Basically, he was had an out-of-body experience, and he was very close to his physical body. And he found that there was a sort of feedback loop between them. We sort of come to a different conclusion of what was going on there, right? But the point is that there was some interplay or exchange of information that was going on there that had an effect on the physical body perspective. So I
Which
think there is
suggests
an interplay.
which suggests what I just said is right then, that it does have an effect on the physical body.
I would say so. Simply because if you go deeply into it, like my experience is that we have consciousness, sort of a field of energy. We have a non-physical body, and we have a physical body, and different schools of thought you can go into. Like there's a lady named Barbara Brennan who developed her ability to sort of be very sensitive to these non-physical realms, and she lists like 5 or 6 different non-physical bodies. But the idea is that
Wow.
there's a sort of interplay or interconnectedness between these bodies, so that what happens on a non-physical level sort of mirrors itself eventually to the physical, and then what happens on the physical level, even the other way, can mirror itself to the non-physical. So that's I can't necessarily say I have a scientific basis for that yet, but that would be my hypothesis based upon my experience. Because, for instance, people have applied energetic type healings and healed themselves of things. People have also, like for instance, Barbara Brennan, she had cases where people had ailments that they didn't necessarily have physical reasons for. And she would, let's say, examine them from the non-physical perspective and find damage there and heal it and make their physical experience or discomfort go away. So that will lead me to say that there's a sort of interplay between the dimensions, and what happens on one level will influence the other.
Just going back to when you mentioned about meeting your friend and you deliberately dressed yourself differently so that he would mention it, and he did, thankfully. One of the experiences you had was Big Ben. I found that quite interesting because when you projected yourself, you chose one day to go to see Big Ben, didn't you?
That's right.
I'll let you tell the story, but I just basically, you went to see Big Ben and you was there naked. The biggest question for me on that one is when you actually went to stand in front of Big Ben, do you think you actually went to the physical Big Ben?
Okay.
Or you do?
Certainly, yes, I do. So the full experience for the listeners, what happened is that when I was a kid, this was back when I thought everybody had the experience, and I didn't really think it was a big deal. Okay, at night you just go flying around or running around the neighborhood or something. And
As you do.
so what happened is in my elementary school class, the teacher I guess we was going over history or something, and, and she was telling us about this clock Big Ben overseas, right? So I thought when I went to sleep that night, because it was just so much fun flying around as a kid, I would go to bed early just so I could just fly around all night. And but this is the first time I thought, hey, I wonder if I can actually like go somewhere that I want to go. So I thought, okay, I'll go to Big Ben. So that night I focused on going to Big Ben, and sure enough, that night I manifested in front of Big Ben. And there were people walking around because at the time I didn't really understand that it could be daytime there, because it was like farther enough from me on the planet that it might have still been nighttime for me, but it was like morning or daytime there. And I was sort of shocked by the fact that I was naked, and eventually I got pulled back to my body. But my experience at the time was I was at the physical Big Ben. I was there. Now when I say that sort of um, with some leeway in a sense, because there's some debate about whether you actually go to the physical location or whether you go to a non-physical representation of a physical
That's
of
what
a
I was getting
location.
at, yeah.
Because like for instance, Robin Monroe that we spoke about earlier, he had an experience where one of his psychologist friends or doctor friends, he was aware of what he was doing, and he decided to go out and visit him. They were like doing an experiment. And when Robin Monroe went there, he noticed them at their table playing cards. They were playing cards at their table, at the dinner table, which he thought was strange. And the cards were huge. They were like these oversized cards. He was like, why are they dealing these crazy cards, right? And and the father of the house brought this just like generator like to the car, like just brought this generator to the car. He was like, I thought that was strange. And when he went back in body and he asked him, hey, what were you all doing that day? And what they were doing was they got the mail. And they went out and got the mail, and they went to the table. I guess it was like their normal ritual to pass out the mail to each other. So the cards he saw were the mail, the
Envelopes.
envelopes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? And the generator he saw was some kind of equipment that the guy had. I can't remember what he did. It was a engineer or doctor or whatever, but he had some kind of equipment that he used in his profession that he was transmitting to the car. I'm sure this is a horrible recounting, but you go read his journeys out of body to read it
No,
in
I
detail.
totally understand
Mhm.
the account. And so
Yeah,
basically, he thought that they was playing cards, but that they was handing out the mail. He just misinterpreted it.
that's right. Well, I mean, you can say that he misinterpreted it, that there was some kind of sort of interference in his perception, and he was
Yeah.
at the physical location, or you can
Mm.
say that he was at a sort of non-physical representation of the location that sort of closely matched it, and that's why it was sort of not exactly accurate. But I think this is some of the things that we need to test. I think
It's like
this
when you was at Big Ben and you said you was naked. Is it because you actually perceived yourself as naked because you perceived yourself as wearing a robe to meet your friend on the other occasion?
Well, if I was to hypothesize right now, because I can't say I did a lot of testing to find out why we sometimes naked, sometimes we're not, right? I would just say
Yeah.
it's because I didn't intend any to look a certain way, so that's just the way I appeared.
Yeah.
Normally, only few times that I actually intend myself to look a certain way. Normally, I don't even pay attention to how I look. But
No.
it just so happened that I was standing there and I'm seeing all these people around, and maybe I was thinking, what did I go to bed in, you know? Am I wearing what I went to bed in? And I looked down and I found I was naked, right?
And that made you snap back.
That's right. That's right. Something that I found happen a few times. When some people might call it a repercussion, I called it fail safe. Like whenever something scared me to the point that I was just scared out of my wits, I would just feel myself get pulled back and just sort of slam back into my body. Sometimes it would even have like you were talking about the physical effect. I would literally physically jostle when I slam back in. So
Mm.
so I think that
Russ, did you want to ask a question, Russ? Sorry.
Yeah, we've just had a message come in for Darryl from one of our listeners. She's put, when my mum was in hospital, I couldn't visit due to COVID restrictions. I would feel that I was sitting next to her, holding her hand. It felt very real. Was I astral projection? I'm convinced I was actually there with her, sitting in the chair next to her bed. I saw all the equipments touching her hand. That's from our Sandra.
It's definitely possible. I mean, it would be hard for me right now to say whether it was a valid experience or not because, I mean, in my experience, we can have out-of-body experiences and go to places, and we all know that we can dream and have
Mm.
dreams of places. So what I would suggest as a sort of measuring rod is to test it, and that's one of the reasons why I, for instance, did that experience with Lewis. Because there's things that we can't test. Like if I go out of body and go to the a moon of Jupiter, we can't necessarily take a spaceship there and verify that what I saw is accurate. But if I go out of body and I have a meeting with a friend and I confirm, at least to my satisfaction, that we had a transfer of information and that was a valid experience, and then I have another experience where I go to the moon of Jupiter and the quality of these experiences are the same, then that to me would lend credit to that experience. So I would say just make a good journal of that experience in as much detail as you can, right? And then practice and have an out of body experience that you consciously have. And then as you start to build more evidence and experience, you'll be able to look back and say, wow, I'm confident that was an out of body experience because now I had this experience and I had this experience. And I had this experience when I went and saw my friend and she went to the grocery store unexpectedly and I was able to confirm that. You see what I'm saying? So I
Yes.
think it's just
Yeah.
a matter of testing, and I think it's necessary to start to look at it from this level, not looking at it from sort of guessing or sort of quarterbacking it from afar. But okay, I have this experience. Let me do more tests so I can compare and contrast and start to ascertain what the qualities of a valid experience are, and sort of hone in on what is a valid experience so we can start to categorize it more clearly.
It's difficult to validate a lot of things and try and prove is the magic word with evidence. I mean, it's probably difficult to find evidence in this sort of field anyway, isn't it? Because you can do experiments like you suggested earlier, doing like 10 UK citizens, 10 American citizens, and agreeing to go somewhere, and then the whole study being independently adjudicated.
Mhm.
I suppose that's, but there'll always be someone out there that will sort of find a way to sort of discredit it, or it's a bit like in the ufology stuff that we get involved with, myself, Russ, and we had a guest on, Damien Knott from Australia, who gets lots of photographs and video evidence of UFOs. But even with the UFO evidence that Damien catches, and he's been doing it for many years, it's still not sort of accepted. And at what point do people accept it? I don't think really they ever will totally.
I think at a certain point we will develop the technology to be able to detect these vibrations. I mean, there was a period of time when we thought atoms was a solid thing. I mean, that was the idea. And then eventually we learned that atoms are protons, electrons, and neutrons. And then we was able to learn that even those can be broken up into smaller and smaller things. So I believe we're heading in that direction. I think there will be a certain period of time when we will be able to detect these dimensions technologically and be able to objectively verify it in the way that science normally verifies things today. But at this point, I think the next best thing is sort of subjective experiences. But I think what I believe the flaw is in the methodology is that we're basing it on third party, and the fact is so many people lie. I mean, and I looked into this book where this guy was investigating psychics and people that were supposed to manifest things, and they could never reproduce it under controlled conditions. But then when he turned the wave, for instance, then he manifests something, and they could have pulled it out the shawl of their clothes or whatever. So what I think needs to happen is that the scientist needs to be more involved, which is why I'm starting to work on my degree now. So I mean, if when I had that experience myself, when my friend was able to validate the information he told me, whatever anybody says, I don't see an explanation for how he can have that information. I just don't see it. So, I think we need to be more involved directly, and we just need to have more people doing it so we can test it. So even if we can test it in a third party fashion, we just need more people to be able to test it. So I think it's possible to develop a sort of consensus now, but it's like I said, it's a lot harder because
because you and your friend can, your testimony, you both know that what happened. Mm-hmm. You're convinced, and I totally believe you as well. But I think what it is, like you say, you need to get more and more people doing this. And when there's a big consensus of people doing this, there's no way you can deny it after a while. It's all about the numbers, isn't it, really?
I agree, yeah. And I believe that mainstream science, I mean, I think they're definitely within their rights to not accept it, because I don't think the preponderance of evidence is not there yet. That doesn't mean that there can't possibly be evidence enough for it. It's just not there yet. So that's what we need to work on.
But are they open to it though? That's the main thing. They've got to be open to it as well.
I don't think they do. I think they're justified to not be open. The thing that comes to mind a lot nowadays is the flat earth people. Like, there's people that actually believe the earth is flat.
I was just thinking that.
I've talked to, yeah. So I mean, I've talked to these people. That's one of the things. I'm interested in psychology as well. I was interested in the psychology behind their thinking, and they have a sort of pretentious, critical way of thinking, in the sense that any evidence you present of the globe, they will deny it. But you could present literally anything for a flat earth, and they will just accept it right off the bat. So, but when you look at the actual scientific method, the idea is your responsibility to put forth the evidence for the claim you're making, and it's our responsibility to do everything we can to disprove it. And if we can't disprove it, then it remains. Not that we necessarily prove it. In science, you
Yeah.
can't necessarily prove anything. What you can do is put forth a hypothesis and put it to as much rigorous testing as you can conceive of. And if it survives that testing, at least to the extent that it survives, then it remains. And after so much testing, then it becomes a scientific theory. So I applaud the fact that they don't accept it, because so many people lie, so many people can be mistaken. I mean, even I can be mistaken, right? So that's why I want to test it myself even further. So I think there's a lot more testing to do, and I think we need to have more rigorous thinking about it, even in the scientific or paranormal community, because I've went to, for instance, psychics. I remember years ago when Tribal Four first came out, and it was in the Kentucky Book Fair, and
Yeah.
and one of the people at the fair, we went to they took me to a psychic fair, and they bought me some psychic readings. They'll treat me like a treatment or something. And what I found was that their readings were totally inaccurate.
Oh,
And
they gave you a reading.
the
Yeah.
reading, yeah, that they gave
Yeah.
me, and it seemed like they were sort of even reading from a sort of playbook.
Yeah.
So so and then when I mentioned the book that I talked about, where the guy was doing investigations, the people were just making up stuff, but other people believed it. Going back to the flat Earth stuff, like you could look at the stuff they put out, but just a little bit of investigation, you can see it's just there's so much holes in it. So James Randi, he's a common one. He went around debunking people. So I think that it does not do us any benefit or favors to not think critically about it and say, hey, we need to put this to the test and be more critical of it, and validate it. And the only thing that can possibly happen if it's valid is that we gather more information of it about it and validate it more. So with that experiment with my friend, it's possible that uh, it would have failed. And I did have that thought. I was nervous about it, because by that point I've been doing this for, at that time, like what, 10 or 20 years or whatever, and it was a valid thing to me. But I thought, wow, I didn't really test it, and I did
Was
have
that
that
your
thought.
was that your first experiment to try and to try and
Yeah,
validate it?
I would say that was my first one to really try to validate and see if it was real. And I did have a certain amount of trepidation. What if this doesn't really work out? What if it was I was hallucinating the whole time? Right? So, but I think even that's not enough. We need to have, it needs to be repeatable. Because so at this point, like I discussed with my psychology teacher, is basically a case study. It's just basically two people, but it needs to be very repeatable. And I think we do need to be more rigorous, and start to think about these things less as paranormal,
Mm.
but more scientific. And that's the only way. Because like when we talk about extraterrestrial races, when we talk about people who had contact, or at least claim to have contact with ET races, these races are aware of these different dimensions, and have technology that apparently interfaces with it. So if that's a possibility, then that means these experiences would be able to stand against the most rigorous scientific testing. So I think we should put it to the test, and make it happen.
So you satisfied yourself, you satisfied your friend, and now you need to sort of go out there and try and push it out there, the evidence, and try and validate it to everyone, or as many
Well,
as you can.
Well, I mean, in a sense. I mean, not necessarily try to prove it to people, but let's actually put it to the test and see if we can get evidence to the extent that warrants mainstream science looking at it. So I mean, I'm becoming a mainstream scientist, so I can say to that extent that is starting to be looked at by mainstream science, but it's definitely far from having that wealth of evidence that's required to be considered officially valid. So, but that's
One
on
of
us.
your,
That's on us to start to put it to the test and think more critically about it.
Definitely, and when one of your OBEs was involving Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, um, obviously that's a character that's been made up.
Mhm.
So how did that OBE go? I mean, was it something that you was interested in as a horror person, and you sort of created a dream to sort of, that's what I mean. It's hard to, for me, like, you went to Big Ben, because I know Big Ben exists.
Okay.
It's in London, and you travelled there and you stood outside there, and you saw people. I don't know what sort of interaction then people would have experienced, whether they would have felt anything as you being there, like a spiritual feeling like we get sometimes when we do paranormal investigation. But anyway, I'm coming off what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is the Big Ben experience was an actual landmark that exists in London, and you could, the description is that you come out your body and went to Big Ben. But with the Freddy Krueger, how do you explain that? Because and I'm not trying to be skeptical. I'm just trying to analyse all the different. I'm trying to analyse the different OBEs and sort of try and get it in my brain.
Yeah, certainly. First, let me say I welcome the skepticism, and that can only help me to better refine my research methods and find any flaws in what I have. So any questions are welcome. And the background of that experience is I was going through what could be considered a sort of masochistic period of life where I was terrified of the Freddy character, but I always watched the TV show. So,
Yeah,
so I would watch it. Yeah, so I would watch it every time it was on, but I would go to bed terrified of Freddy. So what happened is, I was still having out-of-body experiences at this time, and Freddy would chase me all night. Like all night, I'll be running from Freddy. And so in answer to your question, what I concluded later is that there's entities in the non-physical that, just like us, can make themselves look a certain way. So in my experience, the entities that exist on these non-physical realms, they're really no different than us. So going back to my sort of breakdown of our makeup, we have the physical body, we have the non-physical body, and consciousness. And what we might call the non-physical entity is just a non-physical body and consciousness, or just consciousness, just like us. They just don't have a physical body. So you can go to
just like you chose to wear that robe, this entity chose to be pretty,
exactly. Yeah. You got it.
That explains it a lot for me.
That's right. That's right. So just like how you can go to pretty much any school in the world today and you can find a bully that just likes picking on people. You can have an out-of-body experience and you can find a bully that likes picking on people, and they'll become your worst nightmare and chase you around.
I mean, yeah, that explains a lot. When I was asking that question, I hated it because I was sounding like a skeptic and I'm trying to trip you up or something like that. But I'm not, because I'm totally convinced by all of this. I don't need, I'm totally there. But I just I couldn't square the circle. But once you mentioned the fact that they're non-physical entities that can actually present themselves as whatever they want to, that explains so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've just had another question coming, guys, from Simon. He says, is it possible that I may not be able to find my way back if he was to try it?
In my experience, no. The only thing or the worst thing I found to happen is, this is a period of time when I was practicing a lot, and I had an out-of-body experience, and I did a few things. And I came back to my body consciously. I think that period of time, and this will lead to what I'm going to follow up with, but I decided to come back to my body and get in consciously, and I couldn't. Like, I tried to jump in, I laid where I saw my body at, and I couldn't get in. I just couldn't get back in. And what I surmised was, okay, my physical body is still in deep sleep. At the time, I don't think I was really aware of like the delta and all that stuff, but I thought, okay, it must still be in deep sleep, so I'll just wait for it to wake up. So I just sat next to my body and waited for it to wake up, and then eventually I got back in and woke up. But usually what happens is I'm out of body doing whatever, and I just get pulled back in. So especially when you first start, that's a common fear. But if you actually practice this stuff and try to get out of body, like for instance, every single person I taught, every single one, without exception, their first out-of-body experience lasts no more than like 10 seconds. No more than like 10 seconds, maybe 20. So you will have no problem.
What was their experience? What was that 10-second experience?
Well, matter of fact, I put them on the next density site. Matter of fact, I'll read straight from the site, but anybody who wants to, you can go to the next density site, and I put up snippets of their experiences. So for instance, one of them, his entry was, and this is a quote from his journal, I could feel strongly the sensation of running, and then the sensation came in very strong. And as a wave passed through me, I felt the pop, and I was out of body. It felt like I was floating. I felt that I was 100% out. That was student DEBJ NDC 28. Student number 5 said, I decided to go to sleep after the session, and I turned on my side. Now at this point, I guess I was sleeping, but not too sure. All of a sudden, I'm floating out of my body, or so I thought I was. I was in my bedroom. It happened without any warning. I shot upward very quickly. I didn't see any flashing lights or hear any sound. It was, and she put all caps, it was very real. The only thing I could see was the ceiling. I didn't look down at the bed. It felt like my astral body was a small ball with just my consciousness in it. So I'm staring at the ceiling and I can see the details of the ceiling, which has texture to it. I instantly started to panic and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was having trouble breathing. When that happened, I started to float downward very slowly. But a thought came to mind. I said, calm down. Don't panic. You can control this. As soon as I had this thought, I started to float back up to the ceiling again. Then everything went black and I think I woke up afterwards. So that's two examples. But you will not have to worry about getting back in. You'll just be thinking, oh my God, why the last so short? And what's going to happen is you're going to have to train for weeks or months or even years to get to the point to where you can start having extended experiences.
Well, can I just talk about the experience I had?
Mm-hmm.
When I explained to you about Karen Fraser when she analysed my dream. One thing I remember is that when I was sort of I wasn't awake, but I was sort of semi-awake. So I had to explain it, and I sensed that I was above the bed, but at that moment I was panicking. I was panicking, and I was thinking in my head, I'm not ready for this, and I don't know if there's any validation to this, or you can sort of explain what was going on, because I don't know. I actually heard someone saying, "Don't worry, let it happen. Don't worry, let it happen." And I said, no. And this is why I'm still sort of in this state. And I'm saying, no, I'm not ready. I can't do it, because I had this horrible panicky feeling, because it was the sort of it was something I've never experienced before. And I was awake enough to know that it was happening. And I said, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then all of a sudden I woke up. I don't know who that was talking to me. Have you heard of that before?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it definitely fits the profile of an out-of-body experience, the floating, the voice. And you'll be surprised the different entities you can find. So it could be just an entity there that was trying to help you out. So I remember one time I was one of my practice periods, there was this female entity that would visit me. And she was saying, meet me, come out and meet me. And for some reason, I was having difficulty getting out. I kept getting stuck. Like I better get my arm out, but I couldn't get the rest out. I can get my head out, I couldn't get the rest out. And I told her to help me out. I mean, try to help me. And she actually went through the floor and started flying up through the floor, ramming in my body and trying to ram me out.
Yeah, that's in the book.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Another one of my students, first out of body experience. Rolled out of body, fell onto the floor, stood up, and there was an entity standing at the door. So it just seems like a common thing where there's these entities about. Another one of my different practice times, I used to just float up a bit or hit like a deep theta state. And I would hear a lot of voices, like there was similar to what Monroe talked about with I believe they called it the M-band noise. But it seemed like a lot, almost like the room was filled with people. Um, and there's other experiences where I went and met people and had interactions. So there's just entities. So I wouldn't be afraid. My experience is if you have an out of body experience, you will see entities. And
Darryl, I didn't actually attempt to do it. I just woke up one morning and that happened. Do you know why, or guess why that happened?
Certainly. So you'll find that most people don't remember dreams or anything. So a lot of people come into the course or the research study and they don't remember dreams. And then as they train, they start to remember it. But what happens is even the average person, if you do something to interrupt your schedule, like maybe that night you went to sleep late, or maybe you woke up in the middle of sleep or something changed that caused you to remember it. But my experience is every night we always have an out-of-body experience. So I would actually look to not the strangeness of the out-of-body experience itself happening, but the strangeness of why did I remember it this time? What was going on during that period of time that allowed me to remember it? So it sounds like it's just you became aware of one of the many experiences you have when you go to sleep normally. And because you were conscious of it, it was so strange, you had that trepidation about it. And that entity that was there could be there all the time. You just was never really aware of it. So it sounds to me just like it's a normal experience that you have when you go to sleep that you happen to be conscious of for whatever was going on in your life at that period of time.
Do you think that that entity is like a spirit guide, or they just suddenly decide, oh, they're going to come and help me out?
Can't really say. You probably have to communicate with them and find out to
Yeah,
try to get some sense of whether it's a valid entity. Because I mean,
yeah,
like for instance, a being that I interacted with named Okanos, how could you know he's real, right? But he told me a few things that I like. I don't see how I can know that. So to me, he's real. And then being a real being, it could be a spirit guide. My experience is we have spirit guides like Monroe. Bring him up again. So he found out his spirit guide was actually him, his future self. He would go out and have a spirit guide and meet him all the time. Sometimes it could be just
one of
anywhere
your
around.
because one of your experiences, you said that one occasion you sort of woke up and there was three beings in the room, and they were sending you packets of information
That's right.
that you could recall.
That's right.
So, so these entities are here to help us then,
Well,
or is
I
that a bit of
mean,
an oversimplification?
I would say so. I mean, I would. My experience is that there's beings who try to scare you. There's beings who try to befriend you. There's beings who try to teach you. I don't think that there's any kind of monopoly on goodness in any other realms. I think that just like how you have a plethora of types of beings on Earth, you'll find that I mean, there was a period of time when I used to go to this what we might call the demonic realm, and what we might call demons were there. So,
Mm.
I don't think it's necessary to say that anytime you meet an entity, they're trying to help you. But I would also qualify that by repeating that they're like us. So if something is trying to harm you, I mean, beat it up, and it'll leave you alone.
Mm.
But I would say that.
Sorry, they haven't got ultimate power over us then.
Not in my experience, no. I mean, that seems to be a common, I would say, refrain I've seen, and sometimes some people have these big rituals of protection and stuff like that. I'll just
Yeah.
punch them in the face, and then they go away. So
Because that goes on to the $64,000 question: is it safe, or basically, is it dangerous? Because I've been on websites before. There was a guy called Bob something, and he was someone that I sort of latched onto on YouTube. I followed all of his videos. Basically, it was to develop yourself spiritually. One of his videos was like a big warning: don't astral project. It's dangerous. You don't know what you're doing. Is he right?
I mean, I could say I can't really answer that question fully because I can't really say I know everything that could possibly happen. I could
Yeah.
let you know it hasn't harmed me.
Mm.
I could let you know that if it can, if it was like some sort of deadly threat to your life, we were all in trouble because in my experience and observation, we go out of body every single night, right?
Mm.
Every time you hit the delta state, there's a disconnect. So that would tell me if there was really some kind of beings out there that was so powerful
Yeah.
that we could not defend ourselves at all and really wanted to harm us, they could just wait till we go to sleep and just kill everybody. So I
Yeah.
think that that idea is sort of overwrought, and just recognize your own power and just not be afraid. Like for instance, there was a period of time when I finally got tired of fighting these beings. Like there was a period of time when I thought it was fun to me. I would like literally consciously go to those realms where there was like negative beings wanting to hurt you, and I would just fight them, and it was just fun to me. But then what I realized, I kind of got bored of doing that, and I would just fly up, and and as I flew up, what I found was the frequency or the quality of the realm would change, and eventually I would go to a finer realm where they couldn't even follow me. So yeah, in my experience, it's not really a big deal. If
No.
but again, I can't really say I know every single ins and out of the experience. Maybe there's some kind of things I don't know about.
Yeah.
But I would just not discount the fact that you have as much power as they do, and just work out a way to like with Freddie, I learned that I can use my imagination, and I was able to conjure things to put some distance between me and him, and he eventually left me alone. I stopped having that dream. And then
Yeah.
eventually I got to the point, like you mentioned, I was able to make a sword, and then I was able to just use my fist, and then I was able to just fly away. And then I have other things I could be doing with my time. So if you do have something that's affecting you, I would just say apply your creative thinking to it and just find a solution. And I'm confident that you could overcome it.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit about. It reminds me similar to the Matrix when Neo goes into certain rooms and he learns karate and
Hmm.
how to fly a helicopter and all that just by tapping it in.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that. And then all of a sudden he can do all these amazing things, and he had to actually believe it and actually manifest it, and then it happened. But yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about was one thing I've been interested in the last couple of years was remote viewing. Now, I understand with remote viewing, they are operating in the beta, which is what we are in now as we're talking, and they operate in theta as well. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So
Now,
my
how do they
understanding.
do that?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How can they do that?
Well, one way to look at it is we do that all the time. Like
Mm,
in my investigations in the brainwave states, even though we can predominantly be in this or that state, at no particular time are we, or I guess I could say rarely, are we ever in only one state. Like for instance, Robert Monroe and his binaural technology, they've been able to put people pretty much in a uniform brainwave state, but that was something imposing upon the brain. But
mm,
normally, there's always a mixture of all the states. It's just that at any given time, one or other is more dominant.
yeah.
So, in my experience, you can train yourself to simply be conscious across multiple states. Tom Campbell is he calls this parallel processing. So he was one of the people who was in Monroe's Explorer team, which is part of where I got my idea from the research studies and building a group.
What
And
was his
what
name? Tom Campbell.
Tom Campbell, that's right. He wrote
Yeah.
this book called The Big Toe. He's basically trying to link the out of body experience and the dimensions we experience to the theory of everything to try to link quantum mechanics with Newtonian gravity and things like that.
Yeah.
But what he did was, and what all of the people in that experiment did, Monroe would put them in this certain chamber, and there would be a microphone, let's say, hanging from the ceiling, and amidst their out of body experience, they would dictate into the microphone while they're having the experience, which
Wow.
means they will be reading some beta controlling their physical body and some delta in out of body experience. But they have to train to learn how to do that. So when you're talking about a remote viewer, what my experience would say is they're in the theta range because they're getting that visual data, and also in the beta range because they're standing there and they're saying and
Well, they're
communicating what
drawing
they're
and
doing.
stuff.
Yeah, they're drawing on the board. So
Yeah.
that's what that interplay is. So I would call that parallel processing. So or at least I call it expansion, but Thomas Campbell would call it parallel processing. So
Mm.
you could train yourself to where you could, for instance, be in a deep altered state and still physically walk around, for example. So those things, it's just a matter of training.
Russ, you wanted to talk about the next thing that I was going to talk about was the extraterrestrials. You wanted to talk about that, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, because it's something that is quite apt at the moment. Obviously, with our show, and we've been doing quite a lot on ufology and everything. And I've sort of read your chapter. Just gone past your chapter on engaging extraterrestrials, and you touched on the name. Was it Anakos? Is it how you say it?
Okanos?
Akanos. That
Yep,
was a friend that you met, an
that's right.
extraterrestrial that you met when you was at astral projecting, and he sort of he said to you, I say from your book, that he was like a father figure to you or something. Was it like that?
That's right. That's right. According to that being in a different lifetime, he was my father. That is correct.
Did and when I sort of touch on that, does that when you say that's your father, do you feel that it's sort of another life that you've lived,
That's right.
or
That's right. My experience is we live more than one lifetime, and oftentimes the people we interact with now we've interacted with in different lifetimes. Like it's not usually not a coincidence that the siblings and parents and so forth that we have now that we have. But there's also instances where we have lifetimes in different civilizations, like in different planets or different races entirely. And basically, his contention was that in one of my lifetimes on a different planet, he was my father. So
and do you believe that is it a belief that you are here from another planet now? I don't mean that in that sort of contention,
no, I
but
mean,
do you,
I don't think there's anything special in that way. Like you know, when you talk to people like, for instance, Darryl, like he is a channel for the Society, or like Lissa Royal, who's a channel for like the Pleiadians, and there's a few channelers who I see as having valid information. But they will say that we all have those connections. Earth is not like the only planet that ever had human life or any kind of life. So the idea is that we've all had lives in other civilizations, and it's not like I'm anything special or anything. It's just I happen to, during that period of time, like the reason why I travel far has so many different types of things in it. Like I mentioned, channeling and telepathy and telekinesis, because I experiment with all those things. And at the time, I was just experimenting with channeling to see, hey, I wonder if I could do this, if this thing is real or whatever. And that's just one of the beings that I happen to get in contact with. So I don't think it's because I'm anything special. I'm like here from some alien race or something. I think if anybody went into like deep meditation and started to try to access different lives, they will become aware that they had lifetimes that was in different societies or things like that.
Mm. And I sort of also want to sort of draw you to your first experience with sort of when you first saw a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
Or and the ET craft, where you lost an hour and a half of time that
That's right.
surprised you. Do you believe that you got abducted by an alien there,
Well,
or did you just couldn't remember what went on between that gap of that hour and a half?
both. I have
Both.
vague memories of some kind of interaction during that period of time, but it's like very, very brief and vague. So I would say my belief, I think it's fair to say a belief, is that I had interaction during that period of time. Um, and I think it requires a lot more study and research. But yes, my experience is that I saw a craft, I had interaction, and an hour and a half went by that I don't really know what happened during that hour and a half fully. Um,
Do you believe that they wiped your memory, or it was just you say when you astral project, you don't remember it? Do you think that was the case?
Very good question. I think that's what it is. When we so going back to our average experience, my research and my experience and teaching people tells me that everybody regularly have out of body experiences. They just don't remember it. We also know, at least I know from interacting with people, a lot of people don't remember their dreams. But I found that when people start to be able to consciously enter altered states, they start to be able to remember their dreams. Why? My hypothesis is that I have this idea called the awareness threshold. And I learned this from my friend, this idea who I had that validation experience with. So basically what happens is we all go through the states every day, but we have a threshold where we've trained ourselves or haven't trained ourselves to maintain our awareness. So for instance, the average person, they go to lay down, they're in beta, maybe alpha, and let's say they hit deep alpha and they don't remember anything else, right? But then you can train, and then you can start to hit deep alpha, and you're aware. And then eventually theta, where you start to get imagery when you're aware. And then maybe deep theta, and then you start to be able to remote view, and so on and so forth. So what happened is I went into an altered state, but a state that at the time I was not able to bring that memory back. So according to my reading, I would say the reason why the OBE chapter is only one chapter, like the vast majority of my experience will be in out of body stuff, and you could say I dabbled in ET stuff. I wouldn't consider myself
Mm.
an expert, but I have some experience. But my reading tells me that the ETs operate on these altered states. Like our normal base state is beta, but their normal base state is alpha theta. So any kind of interactions you have will sort of force you to switch states in a sense that if you have an object that is really hot and you put it next to an object that is really cold, naturally they will start to equalize their temperatures.
Mm.
Just physics. So when we're in the presence of some being that's in a very deep altered state, that's so strong like that, it can start to influence us. And basically, we hit an altered state, and if we're not trained at entering those altered states and bringing back that memory, we just don't remember. Now, it's possible there might be beings that wipe memory, and I've of course read things like that as well when we talk about abduction phenomena and things. But I can't really say that was my experience because I don't really remember. But I blame it more on just I wasn't training enough at that time to really remember what happened.
I also, sorry, Joe.
I was going to say it's all about being able to control your brainwave activity to get into these different states. Because I'd actually tried one of the exercises on the concentration, and what happened with me there was something that happened to me when I was as far back as I can remember, perhaps when I was 5, 6 or 7. And what used to happen, I always used to get these green and yellow blobs in my vision. Now, this happened normally when I was relaxed. And looking back, I know it sounds crazy, but the most predominant time it happened was when I went to the cinema with my family. And at the cinema, I'm watching the film and taking it in, but at the same time, I'm sort of relaxed back, sort of chilled out. And these yellow and green blobs used to appear, and it used to appear so vividly that it used to interfere with me watching the film.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened for so many years. I used to tell my mum about it, and she just used to sort of brush me aside, oh, it's your imagination, it's little blood vessel burst and all that. I'm not talking about these little, the blood vessel things that most people see in their eyes in the daylight. I'm talking about you're in a dark cinema or in a dark bedroom, and I've got these green, yellow blobs, and they get so strong. And sometimes I feel that I can make them stronger. It's really weird. And when I've done your concentration exercise that's in the book, they got even stronger still. And then I went on I think it was either the same evening or the evening before that, after that. And I tried this concentration exercise laying in bed, totally, relaxed with my arms down the side of my body. I think I told you, Russ, about this, or I told Simon, my friend, about this. And this visual stuff was getting so incredible. It filled up the whole of my visual thing. I was in bed and I was just amazed by it all.
Good.
It sort of made me think that that's what the green and yellow blobs were that I was getting as a child, which, they used to plague me. I used to think there was something wrong with me.
Well, I mean, it could definitely be an altered state. I mean, once you start getting into the low alpha, high theta, you start getting some good visual phenomena. A common one for me would be sort of this yellowish like light and blobs of light. So that definitely could be an altered state phenomena. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily discount physical phenomena because I mean we do, like, going back to that interplay between the different levels. I mean, we can have things happening with our brain that causes us to experience different things. We could also have things where we go into altered states, and you can have an imagery that's so clear that it's more clear than looking with your physical eyes. I mean, especially even in an out-of-body state. I've had out-of-body experiences that, yeah, I mean, I can't even communicate how clear perception can be. I mean, how absolutely razor sharp and clear perception and awareness can be. So I would definitely say keep testing it.
I suppose, sorry to interrupt, I suppose it's because it's different, because with the physical, it's about your lens moving, stretching and contracting and adjusting to near and far, whereas in the non-physical, there probably isn't that process. Everything's in focus. Could it be that? There's no sort of change in depth of field. Everything is in focus, whether it be over there or right here. That's the way I logically see it.
I can't say I've necessarily investigated the method of perception extensively, but in my experience, the hypothesis I've come to is that the mechanism of perception in altered states or in out-of-body states is the same sort of mechanism of perception that we experience when we imagine and visualize.
Yeah.
And which is one of the reasons why, like people who are getting into telepathy and channeling, they'll say that the information coming through oftentimes feels like their own thought, because it's that same mechanism that we use to imagine or have our own inner thoughts. So that's what I think is going on, is a mechanism. And there's ideas of it relating to chakras, and the third eye chakra may relate. I can't necessarily say I'm an expert on chakras, but it does seem to me that that same mechanism is related to out-of-body perception as well as altered state perception when you're having deep meditation, which like what you could have experienced in a movie theater, or when you were doing a concentration exercise.
Yeah.
And what I would say is keep on practicing and experimenting. And what will happen is you start to amass your own base of experiences. You'll be able to better ascertain what is categorized where.
It's the exercises are amazing, and it was a revelation for me when I started to see that there was a correlation between the visual things that you see and the actual different brainwave activity states. You know, alpha, theta, delta, and gamma as well if it's higher. So that was a revelation for me, because then it made me think, you know what, that's good, because it actually gives you an indication, doesn't it,
That's right.
by what you actually see.
That's right. That's right. And that's the basis
Yeah.
behind the neurofeedback. You can monitor your brain waves, and it'll tell, like if somebody's monitoring a person's brain waves, they can tell you if you're awake. They can tell you if you're asleep. They can tell you if you're in REM sleep. So I basically use that as a sort of barometer to let me know, okay, I'm in light theta now. I'm seeing this light imagery. Well, I'm in deep theta now. I'm seeing some strong imagery. Oh, I'm immersed in the imagery. I'm in at least light delta. I can try to get out of body now. So it's a very, I found to be a very consistent measuring rod of how deep you are in the states, and it could be very effective in helping you to master reaching these altered states,
That's what I
including out
loved.
of body.
That's why I loved it when I read that part of the book, because to know that there's an actual barometer, you know, a measuring stick to see where you are, that's amazing, because it gives you feedback.
That's right.
Before I read
feedback.
that, yeah, and before I read your book, it felt to me it was like a bit of a poke in the dark, you know, to where you are.
That's
Sorry,
right.
Russ, was you waving?
Yeah, no, it's all right. I just want to go back to sort of the ET communication part of it, Darryl. Is that all right?
Certainly.
Because over the sort of last couple of weeks that we've actually sort of quite delved deep into the ET communication, and we've got an avid listener that also joins us, and his name's Simon. And a few weeks ago, we went out, well, before Christmas it was actually, we did a sort of outside broadcast of trying to communicate with extraterrestrials. And there's something that come across in your book that really sort of stuck out to me. When you first channeled, you sounded like you put it as it was a bunch of garbage that come through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we did not experiment, but Simon believed he was channeling an extraterrestrial at the time, and it come across that he said he felt drunk, and what he was trying to say to me and Joe was couldn't get his words out. So I'm quite sort of drawn to I just want to sort of pick your brains around that sort of, you know, that sort of experience you had and how you sort of got over that, just so Simon's listening.
Certainly.
Sort of how he can sort of, you know, sort of learn that sort of culture to it.
What helped me was just practice and training. You know, I think the more that we think of these experiences not as necessarily otherworldly, but just skills and abilities that are common to a human being that we're not so practiced in, the better we'll be. And that's all I did was practice. Because every day I would practice, and I got better and better and better. And so eventually I was able to, it was just a very free flow of information. Another thing I noticed was that, and I wasn't even aware necessarily that, at least I haven't read it. I don't think anywhere that chakras are so involved, but I noticed when at a certain point, my chakra started fluttering when he would communicate. So I would say if he's having difficulties, do some energy work. That might help as well. But the main thing is just practicing, just like learning the violin. If you practice every day, and you know, the first day you pick it up is going to sound crazy, and you're going to be hitting the other string. And I'm talking about myself, by the way. And the notes are coming crazy, sounding funny. But every day you practice, you get better at hitting the proper notes and not hitting the other string, and the note is coming through more clearly. That's all it is. So just practice. Also practice the basic exercises. So those basic exercises in Travel 4 are there for a reason. So a lot of reason people fail is because they don't necessarily have the foundation to succeed. So similar to any other endeavor, right? Even like sports, right? People don't just go to the basketball court and then play, you know, fight for the tournament. They don't, you know, the football team doesn't just jump on the field and and playing a Super Bowl, right? They spend weeks and months doing drills and throwing the ball back and forth. So you got to practice concentration. Got to practice meditation. You got to develop these skills, these basic skills and abilities, so that, for instance, if you're trying to get a message and you can't focus, then your mind could be wandering, and you could be thinking about this or
Mm.
picking up that, or even picking up a aberrant message. Just like if you have a radio and you're trying to pick up something from a certain channel, and you're not quite on that channel, and you're picking up static, or you're picking up something else from another channel. You have to focus on that channel. So you got to practice concentration and develop your ability to focus on one thing at a time. Practice relaxation, so you're not tense, so you're not wasting energy with tension and or taking your focus away. So to wrap it up, I would say practice basic exercises, develop your basic skills, practice so you can develop the ability, and discontinue seeing it as something necessarily esoteric or paranormal, but something more like this is an ability that's not normally practiced, but that we can develop.
It's
Yeah.
natural. It's a natural thing that we should be able to.
Yeah.
The strange thing that you mentioned there was, when you said you felt like your chakras fluttering.
Mhm.
Well, before that evening, I don't know if you remember, Joe, that we all put something about a chakra, didn't we, in the group chat before we was meeting? Do you
Awesome.
remember that?
No, I can't. No.
You was talking about solar plexus.
Yes.
I was talking about crown chakra.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was something because I said, it doesn't matter which flutters. It was just, and that was just quite very apt there when you said that. It's like, well, it's sort of a very poignant point to me. Do you know what I mean? That sort of got me thinking that as there.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, energy definitely seems to be an important part of it. Because I didn't necessarily intend to involve my chakras. I just noticed that, and you mentioned solar plexus. If I recall, that's where it started with my solar plexus chakra. And as I practiced more and more, it started going up and up, and then eventually it was my throat chakra that was vibrating. So, energy and energy work definitely seems to play a part. So
And when
practicing
you
energy
felt that throat chakra sort of vibrating and that extraterrestrial contact, did that felt like the communication was more fluent?
Well, I can't necessarily say that the fluttering necessarily helped the fluidity. It could have been even an effect of my greater focus. But I just know that as the information was coming through, I could just feel it. There was not a sound to
Yeah.
it, but if I was to put a sound to it, like just fluttering, and I could just feel this activity, almost like a drum vibrating. Like a drum vibrating, almost, I guess you can say. And as the information was coming through, it would just vibrate, almost like the information had a certain frequency that was going through it. I can't necessarily say I investigated exactly how the chakra was involved. It was just a poignant observation to me at the time, just like you were saying as well. I was like, wow, I'm noticing this going on here. I didn't, I didn't notice that before, and it was becoming stronger as I got stronger at the practice.
Brilliant.
But it's such a fantastic book. It covers everything, doesn't it? It surprised me that I thought it was just going to be, I knew it would be some of your first-hand accounts, but I didn't expect it to go into the detail of obviously practicing. I knew as well, but just like you say, practicing and sort of energy work. It covers everything. It's a fantastic book, and it's great that you put it out there so reasonable. Just to reiterate to the listeners that Darryl's websites are nextdensity.org, which is his research website. That's one I'll be going on soon to have a look at that, because I haven't looked at that yet properly. And his main website is Darryl Berry Jr. So that's Darryl, DARRYLEBERRYJR.com. That's Darryl E. Berry Jr., which is jr.com. That's his websites. And like I said, the Travel Far is only a $5. It's on Amazon. It's a fantastic book. He's got schematic drawings in there, flow charts, all of his accounts, or most of his accounts. Really interesting book. You must buy it. It's fantastic. Russ?
Oh, I'm absolutely listening to you, literally, Darryl and Joe, talking for the last sort of hour and sort of 25 minutes has been amazing. It really has been. It's opened up my eyes to a different level, and it really has. It's something that I think I really want to experience. Say, like when you meet people and that, it's going to open up a whole new experience for myself, because it's something that I definitely want to try and practice.
Awesome. I hope you're doing. I hope more people are doing. I mean, imagine a future where it's common. It's even more common than the telephone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the future I think we can have, and I think if everybody can have these experiences and recognize that we're the same, I mean, you could look how you look when you're out of body, but when you become consciousness, there's no black consciousness or white consciousness or Muslim consciousness, just a field of consciousness, and we're the same. So I think it'll help change our perspective on ourselves and help change the way we treat each other. So, the way I see it, though, if we survive, we'll get there. It's just a matter of when. So I hope to push it forward a bit.
It seems to be that motion in play at the moment. There's a lot of this, the motion of the consciousness and things like that at the moment that is out there. You know, there's a lot of obviously contact with extraterrestrials and certain programs that are using consciousness and meditation ways. So there's a lot of it all linked at the moment, and I think there's a massive food for thought. And obviously, you know, I can't thank you enough for sending this book. You and Joe both surprised me with it, so I thank you for that. It was a great surprise through the door. And literally, guys, if you need a book on astral travel, just hit this book up. It is absolutely Travel Far by Darryl E. Berry Jr. It's fantastic, and it is definitely, as Joe said, well worth it.
I think Darryl hit the nail on the head there. It sort of gets rid of all that Muslim race, ethnicity. It just gets rid of all that judgmental, muddy water sort of stuff. It'd be fantastic if, you know, more of us could do this. And you know, beyond this body that we are, there's so much more, isn't there? That we don't know about. Well, a lot of us don't know about. I think someone's texting. I think. Oh, it's Simon again. I will keep practicing. So he's well.
But no, I thank you ever so much, Darryl, and hopefully in the near future you'll be coming back on the show, because it's been a really, there's more questions that I know that Joe wants to ask. I bet he's got a list as long as his arm sitting next to him.
Well, I was going to talk about every OBE, but I know that in an hour and a half or 2 hours away, we weren't even going to do that. So I just wanted to touch on a few OBEs and some of the stuff that we went over. We could talk for ages, but like we'll save it for another show. And hopefully one of us or both of us can sort of give some feedback on what happened to us or some of it.
But no, thank you ever so much. And I know that Joe's mentioned all your websites and everything, but is there anything else you want to sort of, where people can get in touch with you at all, Darryl?
Thanks for mentioning. Yes, you can go to the site, and if you want to join the next study, you could just sign up to the newsletter. I'll let everybody know when the next one starts if you'd like guidance on your progress and to join to add to the research, and hopefully we can build a team and start getting these experiments going.
I think you've got one here that's going to join. Okay, I think I'm gonna join, put my name down for that one. It's something that I'd really like to do.
So just to recap, the listeners and ourselves will go on nextdensity.org and then you subscribe, yeah?
That's right. So if you go to nextdensity.org, at the top there's a link that says courses. And if you go to the Traveler Program courses, it'll literally break down the different progression of courses that are there. And at the bottom of the page, you can click the link and sign up to the newsletter. And the next time I start the course, I plan on starting one later this year. I'll send out the message saying we'll be getting started soon, and everybody who still wants to join can join up. And basically, I basically hold a weekly class every Sunday and give coaching throughout the week. We post journals on the forums, and everybody has their own personal forum that they post their journals to. And we just develop and progress. And that time, only I believe it was 6% of the people made it all the way through, because it's it is an effort. I mean, it takes time, it takes effort. It's not easy. I believe maybe people being aware of how few people make it through, maybe 10% might make it through, but just like anything, I mean, if you look at any type of endeavor, I'm pretty sure only few people become pro basketballers or few people become pro violinists. So in this instance, you're becoming a pro in consciousness and altered states of consciousness and meditation, and you have to become a pro in these things, and it's not easy. But my observation is those who apply themselves and stick to it, they can have the experience.
So how long does it go back? These subscribers, you know, the 6% have made it.
Say again.
When you started doing this, how far does it go back? Have you been doing this a long time?
Oh, that was completely from last year, from 2020. So in 2020, 31 people started, at least showed interest. 31 people showed interest. Out of those 31 people who showed interest, 8 completed the basics course. So the 4th week is the end of the basics course, and 8 people made it to that point out of those 31 people. And out of those 8 people, 2 made it to the last lesson. So that's where the 6.45% comes from. So what I'm going to do is shorten the course, because all the out of body experiences happen between lesson 4 and lesson 7. So on lesson 4, there were 3 out of body experiences. On lesson 5, there was 1. Lesson 6, there was 1. And on lesson 7, there was 3 out of body experiences. So all out of body experiences happen between lesson 1 and lesson 8. So I'm gonna refine the course and make it 8 lessons for the first course, because that's where most of the out of body experiences happen anyway. And so every time I do a study, I refine it, and I'll compile the data, and this next course will be even better than the last one. And eventually what's going to happen is, when I become an astrophysicist, I'm going to see how far I'll get a degree in psychology, and we'll start doing these things officially. But basically, I'm laying the groundwork right now.
Brilliant.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's dedication. That's dedication.
Yeah, and I will be putting my name forward.
Awesome.
I will definitely be putting my name forward, Darryl.
Thank you so much, Darryl, for coming on. It's been fantastic.
You're welcome.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Karen, for suggesting it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this show of Journey Through the Unexplained with the wonderful, wonderful Darryl E. Berry Jr. It's all I can say to you guys is get onto Amazon, go and buy his book, Travel Far, okay, on astral projection. It's fantastic. And it's all left for me to say now is it's good night from, well, I suppose I better just do a quick bet and eye of all the shows next week, Joe.
Yeah, just a quick one.
So, guys, tomorrow night you've got the lovely Philip Solomon on his Motown show that does all the lovely songs and all that. You've got, I think you've got, Holly's Walk on the Wild Side on Sundays. You've got my new show on Monday nights with Simon called the EGH Talk Show. We've got Mary. We've got the Spiritual Surgery before that. Weird Tales on Tuesday. The Spiritual Surgery on... Is it the Spiritual Surgery? No, with Beth? Am I getting this wrong?
No, that's on a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
And on Thursdays, you've got the lovely Philip Solomon before us. Then it's us again. So...
There's too many shows now.
Yeah, I think I've done pretty well off the top of my head, because my page went down just as I clicked off. But thank you, go again for all the followers. Pulse Talk Radio is making big movements at the moment. So join along. Find us on Mixcloud. All our shows are fully backed up on there. You can find us on Facebook and everything like that. So just head over to the Journey Through the Unexplained and give us a follow, give us a like, give us a message. And I am going to end it now. And all that's left for me to say is it's good night from me.
It's good night from him. And it's good night from Darryl.
Good night, y'all.
Night. Cheers, Darryl.
Thanks.